It's really great to be here. I'm really kind of representing Microsoft's approach to open source technology. I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining about what our strategy is, how Microsoft is really embracing open source. And then I'm going to go a little bit deeper on specifics around the Red Hat partnership as well. Why it's so strategic for both companies, why we're so proud to be a Red Hat partner and join a lot of their programs. And most importantly, why it's really important for all of you and what it really unlocks for our customers and our partners. This is a new journey for Microsoft in many ways, and I think that what we're seeing is a huge amount of momentum and a lot of excitement. And we've been doing a lot of events, by the way. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Vietnam with the Red Hat Partner Conference in Asia. We're actually sponsoring many of these Red Hat forums around the world, and so I really hope that you enjoy the presentation, and I'll be around for the rest of the day, so any questions or feedback, I'll be happy to take them outside. Before I go into the details of the open source strategy and why it's important, and particularly how we work with Red Hat, I think I want to actually take a bit of a step back. If you think about the reason why this is so important, I think many of you are hearing around digital transformation. You think about what that really means for your businesses and for your customers. Thinking about new strategic ways to deliver services to your customers, transform your businesses, create new kind of business models. And that's really the genesis and the cornerstone of the Red Hat Microsoft partnership. How do we take the best of open source technologies, all the technologies that you know and love, where the innovation is happening, particularly in the cloud, the community aspect of that, and bring that in a very intelligent and considered way to the Microsoft platform and the cloud to really enable digital transformation in your businesses and kind of going forward. And this is really the power of the Red Hat Microsoft partnership coming together. And I think you all see the usual anecdotes around digital transformation and how quickly it's kind of progressing. There's a couple of really interesting kind of anecdotes here. When you think about the Fortune 500 customers, just from 2000 till now, over 50% of those customers are actually no longer with us. They're no longer in the S&P 500. And the reason behind that is really because the rate of technology innovation is increasing so rapidly. And a lot of that genesis is around the ubiquitous nature of technology, but also what cloud provides. And to build on that, and I'm not going to talk too much about transformation before I get into the partnership. But a few interesting data points just to explain that. If you think about how our businesses are all transforming and the rate of change, there's a few points that kind of blow your mind a little bit. By 2020, there'll be 1 million new devices enabled every hour around the world. You think about the explosion of that information, explosion of that data, explosion of all the communications and connectivity that can provide. If you think about the way that customers are really transforming, by 2020, if you think of S&P 500, the average age of one of those companies is going to be less than 12 years. You compare that to the 1960s, the average age for a company at that time in S&P 500 was actually 60 years. And the reason behind that is actually driving this rapid technology innovation and transformation. You think of companies like Uber, for example, who came into an industry in taxi provision that hadn't been changed for 10, 20, 30 years, and really actually creating a very, very different business model. And we were kind of really enabling that. And the cornerstone of the kind of Red Hat partnership that I'll talk about is really about the promise of cloud computing. If you think about IDC, Gartner, any analysts that you'll talk about, by 2025, 60% of all computing power will be in the cloud. So I think a lot of people, as they think about their journey, you're thinking about, how do I get to the cloud, or what do I put up, or where do I start? Going forward, the cloud is going to be the default choice, and then it's going to be, well, what don't I put in the cloud? What do I leave on premise, and how do I support my business in other ways? So building on that, we have a lot of cloud momentum in Microsoft. Azure is very prevalent. We're growing very rapidly. We're actually in the top 85% of all S&P 500 customers. We're seeing lots of momentum in many markets, including the Czech Republic and CE more broadly. We're adding more than 120,000 customers kind of per month onto the Microsoft Azure cloud platform. So a lot of momentum, a lot of your customers. Microsoft has deep relationship with all enterprise customers, and we're driving this very, very hard. And so as you think about your businesses and moving to the cloud, we have a very, very strong footprint. Then on that, this is kind of the last slide I'll share just on the cloud story before I get deeper into open source specifically in Red Hat. But we have a very significant footprint. We would say the most significant footprint versus any other kind of public cloud provider. We have 34 regions around the world in many, many different countries. We're actually rapidly, aggressively expanding that. A typical data center, for example, in Microsoft is in excess of 600,000 physical servers. A typical data center often represents a $1 billion investment per kind of region. So you can start to think about the investments that we're making and the rapid inclusion of our footprint around the world. And so when you think about the Czech Republic and you think about this region as a whole, we have actually a lot of choices in terms of technology. And if you go to the Azure site, you can see all the different aspects on that. But to really get to the chase here, why is this important? Why is it important to you? And I think that if you've been monitoring kind of Microsoft's journey on this, particularly over the recent years, you'll see it's embracing open source in a very, very deep and significant way. In Microsoft, we actually encourage all our developers to actually contribute to open source projects. Right now, we have 16,000 developers who are actively contributing to projects. We've actually, to date, provided over 700 million lines of code to open source projects. We have individuals who are part of all the big foundations like Apache and Linux and others. And we focus very deeply on how to enable all those technologies on our cloud platform. This is actually a very small list. The list is actually much bigger than this. But the real point here is really trying to enable choice in our customers and choice in our partners. And once you put customers and partners at the center of our decision making, then the strategy for Microsoft actually isn't surprising. It's not surprising why I'm on stage here, because we recognize that a lot of the innovation in the cloud is happening in open source. A lot of the community aspects, the contribution aspects is so powerful. And we just want to make sure that when you think about using the technologies that love, particularly around Red Hat and their technologies, whether it's any tool, any application, or any framework, the choices that you've made in the past around those technology choices, the choices that you make today for those technology choices, and the choices you want to make in the future through digital transformation and moving to the cloud are consistent with your journey with Microsoft. We aggressively support all these technologies. This is a core strategy of ours. About 75% of all the development work, I would say, that's happening on Azure platform today is about enabling these technologies. And the goal is to make sure all of these are first and best in class on the Azure platform. Today, about 1 in 3, a third of all virtual machines on Azure is actually Linux. We've seen that rapidly growing, and so we have many customers already embracing on this. We have many kind of Red Hat customers already engaging on the platform and bring their technologies to that. And then when we think about Red Hat specifically, it's really kind of simple. I mean, we know that the partnership with Red Hat is so significant for us because we actually see a lot of similarities between the companies. I mean, both companies have really built a very strong business on understanding enterprise customers. Red Hat in terms of providing enterprise quality and enterprise experiences through the best and most innovative open source technologies. And Microsoft also deeply understanding enterprise customers and how we engage and how we understand their businesses and how we provide enterprise quality solutions to meet those needs. And so because the journey that you have with Red Hat Microsoft then becomes a very consistent one. You choose the technologies that are best for the solution, open source technologies, Red Hat and others, and you combine those capabilities as you think about the journey to the cloud. So we see, I'll talk about a specific example a little bit later, but we see many customers who, whether it's on Red Hat technologies, whether it's data analytics, using technologies like Cloudera, DataStax, whether it's in the DevOps world around Chef and Puppet or containers around Docker and Kubernetes and others. And we see a lot of customers say, well, actually, I've made my bets. I invest in those technologies. I just want to think about how I navigate to the cloud, and you can navigate to the cloud with Microsoft based on that. So really, let me kind of get into a little bit more detail about what the partnership really means and how we should really kind of drive it kind of forward. And so think about the promise of the cloud in terms of flexibility and enterprise grade and quality, like I mentioned earlier. And think about bringing the best of your Red Hat kind of technologies to the Microsoft Azure cloud. Across our entire service fabric, of course, all the services we provide, the hyperscale I just mentioned, but all the different assets that we have that the cloud has to offer, whether it's flexibility, ease of provisioning, agility, robustness, failover, kind of load balancing, and so on. And so when we announced the partnership, it's kind of last November, I think people were surprised maybe by a couple of things. One was it took a little while for us to get to the partnership and to close the partnership. And the reason behind that was the second reason I think people were surprised. And they were surprised by the depth of the partnership that we really have. I think people, customers are often asked me around, before November last year, when are we going to partner with Red Hat? When can I run, RHEL and, on kind of Azure? But really, we wanted to go much more deeper than that. It's not just about RHEL, it's about the entire Red Hat stack. We want to make sure that we support everything from atomic host to cluster storage, to cloud forms, to OpenShift, and amongst others. And that's kind of really the genesis of this whole kind of strategy, that we support the entire technology stack around all those things. We also wanted to make sure that we provided a best-in-class enterprise support experience. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute in terms of how do we kind of make sure that when you use Red Hat technologies on Azure, it's a really kind of great experience and you can support your mission-critical applications. And then likewise, we kind of finally on this, we also wanted to make sure that we provided a unified environment. So some of the surprising things that some people felt, I think, when we announced a partnership was, think about management, think about cloud forms. I often get questioned from folks saying, actually, wow, that's interesting that you support cloud forms so aggressively, because don't you have other offerings, Microsoft, called System Center and OMS that kind of do maybe similar types of things? And the answer is actually, if you compare those products, there's actually less overlap than you suggest. But the reason why I embrace cloud forms so aggressively becomes obvious again, because when you put customers like yourselves at the middle of a decision-making process and we say that we want you to choose the best technologies for your needs, we recognize that you want to run multiple hybrid clouds across maybe multiple public providers. So if you want that single pane of glass to actually manage maybe an Azure implementation across an AWS implementation versus an OpenStack implementation on Red Hat, then it makes sense that we should aggressively, as Microsoft, embrace cloud forms as well. So we have a very strong roadmap with cloud forms enabled with Azure. We have interoperability with System Center. And then likewise, kind of finally, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail now, we actually joined the CCSP program as part of Red Hat. And that's really important for us because, again, we wanted to go very deep. I mean, I have probably 4 or 5 weekly calls with Red Hat to talk about many things, not just the partnership, but we also go through engineering lists. What are we kind of innovating on? What kind of blockers are we addressing? How do we kind of make sure that Red Hat technologies work really, really well on Azure? And part of the us being part of that CCSP program to be a certified cloud platform provider is really kind of central to that. This is a deep investment that we're making, and we'll continue to work with Red Hat on a very, very deep basis kind of going forward. And I'll touch upon a little of the few things around supportability and some of the options. But when we think about how you can bring your assets to Microsoft and Azure, there's actually a couple of choices that you have. Firstly, we have subscription portability through, I'm sure you're familiar with Cloud Access. And so for customers that are running kind of Red Hat solutions technologies already, maybe you have existing subscriptions, and you may be running maybe a solution on-premise today, and you want to move that to the public cloud with Azure. Through Cloud Access, you can actually transfer those subscriptions. You don't have to kind of have a new negotiation or a new agreement. You can actually tell Red Hat you're going to move to Azure, and you're going to use those in the Azure cloud. And so we see a lot of customers doing this, lots of large customers, some with multiple tens or even hundreds of thousands of servers starting to move or think about moving their environments to Azure. So that's going to bring your own subscription model. The second thing that you might not be so familiar with is the Red Hat Linux On Demand offering. And so here on kind of Azure in a marketplace, we have a set of on-demand images, version 6.7 and kind of above. And these are great for situations where you have maybe variable demand. So if you think about maybe a line of business application, could be a web application, could be a data analytics application that has peaks and troughs. By using the on-demand images, you actually only pay for what you consume. And so Microsoft will actually bill and charge you by minute and by hour of that consumption. So when you don't use it, you don't pay for it. And what we've done with Red Hat is actually not just include the Red Hat kind of virtual machine within that in terms of consumption, we actually include the subscription coverage as well. So you still continue to get the great enterprise support from Red Hat of running Red Hat solutions and technology in the cloud, but you can do that on a very flexible way. So we see some customers not just Red Hat customers on this kind of scenario, but use this in a very deep way. So think about a scenario like a retailer, where you're providing e-commerce solutions. Maybe you're kind of timing around certain holiday periods, Christmas and others, where you have peaks and troughs, but you don't need to have all the infrastructure in place all the time. So these kind of images are great for actually allowing you to manage that demand. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the depth of our integrated support services. And this is something that we're actually really proud about between the two companies. And so when we spoke to many customers, just to kind of find out opinions as we're shaping the partnership, we really wanted to understand what did customers really want in terms of a support experience and confidence that the partnership is really fulfilling the promise that we're delivering. And so we have a unique relationship with Red Hat. We don't do this with any other provider. Red Hat doesn't do this with any other public cloud provider. But we actually have co-located support engineers in Redmond between both companies. We have Red Hat badge individuals sitting side by side with Microsoft individuals. So if you're coming to a problem, technology, and you need a support request, and you have an issue with running, say, OpenShift kind of on Azure, you can either go through the Red Hat support channels that you know well, or you can actually go through Azure. It doesn't really matter. These teams actually are co-located. They share tickets. They share problem resolution. And the idea behind that is to do a couple of things. One is we wanted to provide the most comprehensive support experience for you. So if you're running Red Hat on Azure, we want to make sure we manage your business and have that commitment. But secondly, we also wanted to accelerate how we learn between the companies. What kind of issues are we seeing? What kind of things can we do to improve the implementations of Red Hat technologies on Azure? And how do we accelerate that learning? So this is a big investment by both companies, and one that I know partners are really keen on, and customers are very keen on as well. So that's a lot about the partnership, and so hopefully you get a view of the depth and the extent. But I wanted to share a little story to kind of bring this to life. So this, and I'll kind of close with some kind of other kind of resources. Today we have actually hundreds or even thousands of customers that are both Red Hat customers and Azure customers. And they do many different things. I mean, we see a lot of customers work in the DevOps space, a lot of customers working on moving web applications, maybe on LAMP and mean stacks onto Azure. But this is actually a pretty significant scenario that we're seeing. This is around data analytics. This is actually a large retail corporation, like a little pharmaceutical, pharmacy type kind of retailer, where you kind of go and get your drugs and other things. So you kind of get the idea. And they had a challenge. They had an on-premise data analytics platform, actually based on Hadoop, kind of the open source kind of project-based solution. And they started to get to an inflection point. They're running out of capacity. So they invested in their own hardware, their own kind of data center, and they had to make a choice. Do they actually continue to invest in that infrastructure, more servers, more data storage, more networking, more physical space? Or do they actually think about moving to maybe a public cloud solution where they can actually provision those things much more flexibly and have the scale-out kind of options that we all know about in the cloud? But the things that they're concerned about was not just the ability to control and to scale those kind of solutions and be able to grow, but also the confidence in moving to a cloud provider, particularly from a pharma house. They were concerned about PII issues, with their customer data and security and provisioning. So they had a very stringent set of requirements for us to kind of meet. And when we looked at this, they're very clear to us and very clear to kind of Red Hat on things that they wanted to continue with and what they didn't want to change. And so they were very happy with their Hadoop implementation. They didn't want to reskill, they didn't want to replatform. They just wanted to benefit from the value of the public cloud. And so we worked with Red Hat to actually show them how they can provision that in the cloud. And it's just a very simple kind of rapid deployment. We addressed all the security concerns. I would say that Microsoft prides itself on the compliance and the trustworthiness of our cloud. We're the most certified public cloud provider. If you go to azure.com, you can see all the certifications across many different industries, including financial services. So any concerns they had around protection of data, security of data, transparency of operations was kind of really addressed by that. And they really looked at, how did they take both Hortonworks, but also the Red Hat technologies they know and love, like RHEL and Satellite and CloudForms, and potentially OpenShift to the cloud. And so today we kind of implemented actually quite a sizable implementation, 500 nodes, 500 physical or virtual servers, with a plan to do about 1,000 servers going forward. So So I just want to share that a little bit, because I think we see a lot of customers in those kind of scenarios where they're thinking about how do I use all the open source technologies that I already have in place, already invested in, I already have skills and assets. But when I think about moving to the public cloud, how do I really kind of take those with me? So the last thing I want to kind of cover is just like some resources. And so, I mean, if you want to get more detail on the Azure kind of Red Hat partnership, we have a lot of great assets for you. You can actually try the Red Hat market images available. We have a lot of webinars and webcasts, so if you want to know how to provision, how to deploy VMs and all those things, we have actually a lot of great kind of assets and trainings that are available for you to use. Likewise, if you want to kind of track what the Microsoft story is, and so we have some very active blogs with over 60,000 kind of Twitter followers, where we actually talk about the investments that we're making in open source, not just about Red Hat, but all the new developments that we're making. Every week, we're kind of releasing more and more kind of open source technologies on the Azure platform, so there's some easy ways that you can kind of track that through our blog space. And likewise, we also have a lot of free trials on Azure. So if you haven't quite dipped your toe into that space right now, you can actually sign up for a free trial, get $100 or a couple of $100 of free Azure usage to kind of kick the tires a little bit. Run some VMs, see how it works, maybe try and see how some of your technologies will work on the cloud platform. So that's really what I wanted to cover today, very kind of quick. But I just wanted to kind of give you the view that Microsoft is deeply investing in open source. It's a core strategy of ours. We work with all the providers in a very open and intrinsic way. We're contributing to all those kind of projects. We're very proud of the Red Hat partnership. We're very proud of being able to support all of you in this room with all the great decisions that you've made in the past around using open source technologies and Red Hat, and making sure that all those technology choices that you made in the past are consistent with your journey to the cloud with Microsoft and Azure. So with that, I just want to thank you, and hopefully if you have any questions or any feedback, we'll be around for the remainder of the day. We actually have a booth outside as well, so I'll be happy to take any questions offline. Okay. Thank you.